This is Marketing Uncomplicated. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Uncomplicated. AI is everywhere right now, and that was one of the biggest topics that we had chatted about last year. And everybody, when Riverside did a recap for me, AI and AI and AI and AI was based on every conversation. So every day we're hearing that it's going to change the way we work, the way we market, the way we sell, and the way we lead. But here's the real question. Is AI actually making us more productive, or is it creating more noise? Today's guest has spent her career helping organizations navigate massive workplace transformations long before AI entered the conversation. And for those of you listening, AI has been around not just when ChatGPT came to market, but it's been around for a very long time. And as marketers, we utilize a lot of platforms that have had AI automation in them already. So Monica, from leadership roles at Google, Goldman Sachs, EY, so that's Ernst & Young, and Bank of America, to pioneering Goldman Sachs returnship program and co-funding Google's Product Inclusion Council. Monica has been at the forefront of helping people adapt to change. Today, she's helping leaders and businesses humanize AI using technology to amplify human strengths rather than replace them. If you've ever wondered how AI fits into your business, your marketing, or your team's future, the conversation will help you separate the hype from what actually works. Welcome to the show, Monica. It's so good to have you.
Thanks so much, Sasha. I appreciate you sharing your platform and happy to be here.
So let's dive in. Let's talk about your journey. You've spent your career helping organizations, as we mentioned, navigate change long before the AI bust, I should say. It wasn't even a boom since it's been out for so long. What led you from talent and leadership transformation into the workplace AI?
So a little bit of a journey. I think the through line of my career is that, whether, starting at, Goldman Sachs to Bank of America to EY to Google, I was always in the space of helping people realize their full potential, learning how to navigate the corporate culture so that they could continue to move up in their career and things like that. And always thinking about, how do you make sure that people who maybe didn't have the same kind of opportunities or the same kind of background be able to navigate places that were unfamiliar to themselves. And so I think it kind of this idea of, AI entering the workplace where, like you said, AI has been around for a long time. I mean, at Google, they've forever had like the deep learning, all of the, machine learning, all of these things. But what happened roughly 3 years ago is that it was open, right? Like open AI. That was the whole point of opening up AI, democratizing access to everyone. And this is where kind of the idea of, okay, let's democratize access, but just because you have access to the tools doesn't necessarily mean you know how to use them and how to navigate this landscape of, agentic tools, generative tools, like all of these things. And it's a little overwhelming to people. And so this was kind of that idea of how do you help people navigate this unknown world. And for many, it's a little bit like, blind leading the blind. Like, yes, there were certain things where AI was developing, but never at this speed and never at this scale. And so what's happening is that change is happening faster than humans know how to change. And I think that's where the disconnect is. And so that's where, we come in at FlipWork, where, we built what I think of as an operating system for agentic human reinvention, meaning that the old playbooks no longer are going to function the way they used to function pre-AI, and post-AI. You really have to reinvent yourselves, where we help leaders and professionals go from knowing that AI exists to actually working differently because of it. And then proving that, the shift has actually happened for them.
So thank you for that. But looking back on your career, what lessons from Google and Goldman Sachs are most relevant today?
I think what's most relevant is this idea that it's learning that change is inevitable. Like change is the only constant. And I've learned that, and I've always, kind of embraced that idea. But the pace of change is what is different. And so the biggest things that I've always learned in these organizations is that they were very forward thinking, and they were always proactive in the way that they would go out there and try to set the gold standard, right? A lot of people are usually wait and see. Let's let somebody else try it out, and whatever works, then we'll kind of adopt it and go with it. And I would say that the pace of change back then allowed for that, right? Like, because people, I mean, if we think back, like when the internet hit or when email came along, it was just like there was still the people who were like hardcore phone calls, like, and it took a little over a decade for email to be the only way that you communicated. Fax machines kind of then went away and all that kind of stuff. And there's some definitely holdouts, but for the most part, people adopted, but it wasn't kind of like, oh, we're going to get left behind if we don't adopt email right away. The difference with AI is that, things are changing so quickly that if you wait and see, you could be left behind to a point where you're never going to be able to catch up. Or, you're going to have somebody else change faster and they get more of the market share, et cetera. So what I learned from Goldman and Google is that they were always, they created this kind of psychological safety of testing and learning, allowing people to go out and try something before it had ever been tried, knowing that the payoff was going to be that you're the one who's going to set the standard and probably be the household name or the gold standard, where that in and of itself kind of helps you establish a bit of a moat around yourself. And so that's the idea that, I took with me in all these organizations of being the pioneer. Google has that old saying of like, let 1,000, flowers bloom, and like all of these ideas. And then, some are going to stick and some may wither. But at the end of the day, you're on the forefront. And so that's what I learned. And that's really what we've embraced here, is thinking about with AI, you have to disrupt yourself before you get disrupted, because it's not a matter of if you're going to get disrupted. It's when you're going to get disrupted, and that's probably sooner than later.
Oh, absolutely. And I don't think people are really seeing how fast the wave
Yes.
is hitting. Have you always thought of technology as a people issue rather than a tech issue?
Yes. And partly it's because at the end of the day, the tools are like, the technology and tools are always there to help the human get the task and the job done. But the biggest kind of roadblock that we've seen is that, and we are seeing it more and more with AI, and probably more prominent with AI, because you've had so many companies over the last 18 months throw in millions and millions of dollars to bring in the tools and buy the licenses and all of this kind of stuff. And, over probably, I would say the last 8 to 12 months, we've had lots of companies come to us saying, hey, we have all of the tools, and the research is showing, though, across the board that less than half, 47, anywhere from 33 to 47% of the people are adopting it. And so they're not seeing the return on investment on these AI tools.
Yeah.
And the roadblock is that it's not the tool, that the tool is broken or the tool is messed up. It's not it's not the intelligence of the people. It's more of a behavioral shift, right? It's more of a behavioral change that's happening. And we can get into a little bit more of what that is, but people are getting in their own way of adopting the AI. And so that's where we're trying to help people unpack and really shift the way that they think and they lead, and really kind of getting rid of some of these conditioned beliefs that we have, and that's causing them to get left behind.
Yeah, no, I love the getting in their own way, because I think a lot of the times that is the case across the board with, not just
Yes.
with AI, but a lot of things in terms of, a company moving forward or not, right? And so,
Yes.
which that leads me into my question outside of that. What do you feel leaders are getting wrong about AI right now?
I think what most leaders are getting wrong is that they are thinking as soon as you roll out the tools, and once somebody has access to the tools, like, okay, you have the tool, now go get things done. And a lot of the times people are a little hesitant, where many of them are wait and see, like someone needs to tell me or give me permission or show me how to use it, which is part of the issue as well, right? This isn't like, it's not like a normal technology tool in the past that had been rolled out. Like, hey, here's, Excel, or here is, a calculator, and this is how you use a calculator to solve your problems. AI takes a little bit of training from the individual themselves to get the work done. So it's kind of one of those things where people have to get their hands dirty and really get in there and train the AI to do what it is, the nuanced things that they do. And so that's the hard part, is where leaders are thinking that this is normal AI training, where it's just like, oh, here's this tool, here's how you prompt, and here are the buttons you click, and so go get it done. There's a lot more nuanced things to the AI where you really have to start to think about how do we help this individual reinvent the way that they do work and change the way they do work so that they can use the tools in the in the best way and really get the most capacity out of that tool. And so what's happening is leaders are saying, here's the AI, let's throw it on top of your workflow and things should be great. But the irony is that many times you are either duplicating work, or if there's flaws in your workflow, you're amplifying the flaws that are in the workflow with the AI.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So digging into that a little more in terms of going from the leader down to the businesses, what businesses are getting wrong. A lot of business owners feel pressure, as we mentioned, to use
Yes.
AI. Then there is the attitude of, I'm going to wait, or I'm jumping on the bandwagon, or I'm going to hire somebody, they're going to help me. But
Yes.
what's the biggest mistake you see companies are making right now with that?
The biggest mistake that most companies are making is that either, like I said, if they are giving people the AI, they're not setting the right boundaries and the restrictions around it in terms of really understanding. There are some security risks. There are risks, and so there has to be a little bit of planning when you're rolling these things out to say, for many of us, we know like the AI can train on your data if you're not careful, if you don't go into the settings and make it a closed environment and not allow it to train. For companies and businesses that have proprietary, frameworks or proprietary data or things that they don't want to get out, you want to make sure that you're setting some of these guardrails so that you understand how the system is going to work. And so, and in the other cases is that many companies are choosing one tool, but that's the danger as well, because it's not one size fits all. There are different LLMs, there's different tools, and they can do very different things. And so what we have learned is that, chat GPT is a really good general kind of, tool that's really, you can use it for lots of things, but Claude is really good for, more communication style type of generative AI. So for marketers and people in communications and all of that it is a little bit more refined in that way. Perplexity is really good for research and sources and all of these types of things. Gemini is really good for search. And so sometimes what we're hearing is that a company will roll out a certain tool and think that it's one size fits all. And then you have business units or, verticals that are saying, this doesn't work as well for us. And so then they themselves find a reason not to use the AI because it doesn't work for them. So many times you have to really start to understand what is it that the team is actually needing to accomplish and which tool is actually the best tool that will align for what it is that they need to or want to do.
Yeah.
And so that's where it's kind of like, you can't really just roll out a bunch of licenses and think it's going to solve for everybody. Is really understanding what is the overall kind of like area of expertise that needs to be augmented with AI and which is the best tool for it. And so that's where you're starting to see a lot of companies scale back and try to realize and understand, is there a niche tool or a tool that has been created with the contextual knowledge that is needed for this type of work? Or can we use an LLM and those leaders learn how to train the tool with their contextual knowledge to be able to get the job done? So it's that idea of like, not like, it's not one size fits all, and really getting people to understand how do you use the tool and which is the best tool.
No, I love that, because what essentially I think the biggest fear, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that a lot of people are thinking, this is going to create more work instead of less, right? Because there
Yes.
is the lack of education. So then there's going to be the need of onboarding, then
Mm-hmm.
working through, and then getting everybody to utilize the tool, so on and so forth. But in actual essence, when you're onboarding technology to any company, AI or not, this is what normally happens, right?
Yes.
I mean, you're upgrading a system, there's going to be a change, there's going to be a lag, there's going to be a time differentiation. And yes, I understand the concept of don't fix it if it's not broken. The problem is that it's not that it's broken. We're moving into like the gold rush of technology. And if you're not jumping on that bandwagon, you're going to miss out on that, both
Yes.
financially and speed and agility to market, and then internal optimization and so on and so forth. And then you're going to be the ones last standing to say, oh, we're not getting the clients that we used to get because we're
Yes.
not able and we haven't adapted, right?
Yes.
um,
Yes.
it's very interesting, the whole process, because also the concept I feel like to them is, are we automating before we optimize? But it's almost in parallel with each other.
Exactly. And I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of, some of the pushback we are getting is ironically with some of the big enterprise companies that we work with. It's those the middle managers who are responsible for the KPIs and for hitting all of these, goals and things like that, where they're like, we are so busy trying to get the work done that if we try to slow down and reinvent or redo the way that we do work, we're going to, get left behind. And yes, there's probably going to be a little bit of that pain point of you have to slow down to speed up. But I don't think that they realize that the payoff at the end is that, yes, you may slow down for 1 to 2 weeks or 3 weeks to kind of get this going. But the compounding effect of AI is going to basically, just rocket ship, kind of push you forward where you're going to end up being able to do deliverables and deliver in a matter of weeks what used to take you months, but it may have taken you 2 or 3 weeks to get started. So there is a payoff in getting them to understand, but sometimes it may be that those middle managers aren't given the permission or aren't given the safe space to say, we're going to test and learn, break some things, maybe even get things wrong in this kind of like trial period. But once we get it and it starts clicking, you're going to basically fast forward, in a compounding rate that you're going to make up for that lost time. And I think that's the kind of place where you have to get those leaders comfortable and being able to say, okay, the payoff is worth it. And we need to, like you said, onboard and do those different things in order to get to a place where we've incorporated and really weaved AI into our day to day.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree, because it's the adaptation and the willingness to change. I mean, I was just on a research call, and they were asking a bunch of questions about LinkedIn, and a multitude of different platforms that can do what LinkedIn does, and so on and so
Yes.
forth. The thing is about LinkedIn, which I think is really interesting, and not to divert, I'm making a point here, is that
Yeah.
they are a company that is very facing forward. They are a company that
Yeah.
like is into change and wants to make a difference and wants to basically come out on top. But at the end of the day, like most of these companies, they become bureaucratic. Actually getting the needle to move can sometimes take long. So that's where
Oh,
companies
yes.
need to decide, are you going to maintain that bureaucracy internally and have everything non-centralized, where like you're just having to get approvals because of whatever and whoever needs to be,
Hierarchy. Yep.
yeah, sign
Hmm.
off on XYZ, versus actually operating like a SaaS company within today's world and moving the needle a lot further than you can. So it's really a leadership change to really execute, to see how quickly you want to change, because from a technology standpoint, as a marketer, that's what I look for. I look for
Yeah.
longevity. I look for continuation of evolvement. I mean, it's like with people. If like you're not evolving as a person as time change, you're kind of gonna, drop along the way or just stay stagnant. And that's what's gonna happen with tech and technology tools and platforms and all of that, because
Oh,
we
yeah.
are moving at such a rapid pace right now.
Absolutely. And, we're finding more and more that the more nimble, agile teams are those smaller teams that don't have all of the red tape or the bureaucracy to go
Yes.
through. And sometimes when you get to these large enterprise companies, it's like they're a huge barge or a cruise ship that's trying to, navigate, where you have smaller teams that are kind of these like Navy SEAL speedboats that can kind of like go everywhere because they're using the AI tools and they're moving much faster. And that's where I think this democratization of being able now to do things that, at a, smaller companies being able to do more than the larger companies because of that agility, because AI is actually allowing them to compound and scale at a level and a speed that they used to not be able to without the huge teams, right?
Yes, yes.
And so this is where I do feel like the solopreneur, the small team, the marketers are able to, service clients in the same way that some of these larger companies used to, because they just had more manpower. Now with the agentic tools, you create agents and you have a hybrid team of real people and digital people, or digital agents, that can get things done that a 20-person team used to get done with 2 or 3 people. And so that's where, if you leverage it in the right way, you can really amplify your business tenfold if you really did kind of start embracing the tools and not necessarily needing to hire, or taking the same team and not getting rid of the team, but amplifying their capacity with the AI, to where, your team of 5 turns into a team of 20 because they've augmented themselves with agents.
Yes, totally. I want to talk a little bit about into when marketing breaks. So marketing often works when it's just the founder, but things start breaking once the team get involved. So why does this
Yes.
happen in that sense? Because sometimes it's not sometimes people may argue, well, the team is what makes it up and so on and so forth. So let's unpack that.
Yeah. I mean, I think, when humans get involved, or like too many cooks in the kitchen, or too many, hands in the cookie jar kind of thing, that's where, because there's always breakdown in communication. And there's like miscommunication, right? Kind of like when you think about the operator game and you start one thing and then, the last kind of person repeats what was said and it was totally, turned around. I think the beauty with AI is that that lost in communication isn't going to happen as often if you set the right parameters at the very beginning, right? And so what we're learning more and more is that the human in the loop needs, isn't as frequent as needed when you start setting up your agents or your workflows in the right way, where sometimes now 80% of the work can get done by the agents or the AI, and 20% of the work, which is the more high value, strategic, discernment, judgment, all of those kind of roadblocks or guardrails that you're setting, where you can say you spend 10% of your time up in the front to tell the AI what needs to get done, and the rules and the parameters and your kind of skills docs and things like that. And then somewhere along the, 5% here and 5% at the end, to where you're quality checking and all of that, where when you tell it something and you give it a set of rules, whether it's a skills doc or you kind of put the parameters and saying, here's the template, don't deviate from this template, the AI is pretty good in staying in those lanes, opposed to where humans sometimes may forget or have their own preference, or all of these types of things, that you're dealing with a lot of behavioral things as well, where things can start breaking down in that way. And so I think that's the beauty of AI, in that, I tell people, and you mentioned onboarding, that sometimes it's like when you start to play with the AI and bring on and saying, okay, I'm going to build this agent, or I'm going to start working with this particular LLM, be it ChatGPT, Claude, or whatever, you have to treat it like an artificial intern. And just like when you brought an intern on, you may give it a task or a project, but you don't expect that intern to give you a result that's 100% correct at the very, at the end. You get it and you say, here are some preferences that I like. I don't like this. This is wrong. You need to bring more of this in. You need to do that. You still have to train your AI in the same way. But the beauty of sometimes the AI or the agent is that it doesn't forget, right?
Yeah.
It captures everything that you tell it, and it starts to do it in that way, where if you prompt it incorrectly, or you give it something vague, it's going to give you something vague back. And so it's one of those things where, like you said, when things break down, many times it's because of the human piece of it that might have the nuances that come with that. Where with the AI, you can get together and you plan and you create the roadmap, and it pretty much will stick to it along the way.
Yeah, yeah. That's that's really good advice, because I think a lot of people would just veer off, and then wonder why it's not working. But
Yes,
and then as you said, an intern or even a salesperson is only as good as they are, if you train them right, right? So it's, if you
exactly.
don't give
Exactly.
them that guideline about who you are and why it's not necessarily why they're there, but it's, how do you do things? Because what they would have done at some other company, or the AI comes with a blank slate. How are you rebuilding it? Because right now AI is only being trained on what you're feeding it. We haven't gotten to the point yet of AI just, creatively being able to run off. I mean, at that point,
Yeah.
then that's a whole different conversation than we're having
Yeah.
today. But
Yeah.
yeah.
And I think, what you're, especially for marketers and especially for the things that, you and your audience do, there is this, there is something that is very uniquely going to be extremely hard to replace with that human creativity, right? I mean, we here at FlipWork, we always say that we try to help people become what we call people squared. And what that means is that you take the human creativity, the contextual knowledge that and the lived experience and just that authentic intelligence that we all have, and we basically amplify that to scale with AI. And so the difference is that the great thing with AI is, yes, they've democratized access, and now we all have this intelligence at our fingertips that we may not have had access to in the past, right? There may have been, some sort of, we didn't have proximity to the experts, or we didn't have proximity to, the pot of expertise or the insights, but now we have it. The difference is that we can all prompt AI with the same prompt and get the same output. How are you going to make that authentically yours? And that's where the difference is where we're starting to hear some of this, like, oh, there's a lot of work slop, or that's AI generated. And I can tell that marketing message is AI generated. And so it loses some credibility. I think this is where, from a marketing perspective, communication perspective, when you bring in your authentic intelligence and you bring in kind of your expertise and your knowledge and know what's going to resonate with the human, and you augment it in that way, then that's where you're going to see the differentiator, right? The difference is the proof in that it's really amplified who you are, or who your team is, or who your company. Like, every company has its own taste and its own unique perspective, and it's some lived experience that they're going to bring. And that's the only way to differentiate yourself, is to take the generic kind of output that, the generative output that AI is going to give you, and how do you make it your own? That's what's going to differentiate people. And that's the most human thing that AI is not going to be able to
Yeah,
replace.
yeah, totally. Well said. I want to dive in a little bit into the humanizing AI component. So you talk a
Yeah.
lot about this. What does that actually mean?
So what it actually means is that idea of, what is your zone of genius, right?
Zone of
Because what's
genius. I
scaring a
love
lot of
that.
people, yeah, what's scaring a lot of people is that for the past 10, 20, maybe even 30 years, we have been rewarded on effort equals success. Oh my God, it took me 20 hours to pull this marketing
Yes.
campaign together. And, and I put in the time. I was first one in, last one out. I burnt the midnight oil, and here's this wonderful output that I have. And you get rewarded for it. When you start to use AI, and what took you maybe 12 hours to do takes you 30 minutes or an hour, you start to have subconsciously this identity crisis of, like, whoa, wait a minute, effort equals success. Using AI felt effortless. So I'm probably not going to, like, get rewarded, or I'm not going to be successful. So you don't trust it.
Yeah.
And you start to say, okay, I'm going to do it the old school way. I'm going to use the elbow grease, and I'm going to do this. But in the end, you're going to end up getting left behind, because somebody else who's using AI is going to take their contextual knowledge, their creativity, they're going to use the AI and amplify it, and be able to push out 2 or 3 marketing campaigns in the amount of time it's going to take you to do one the old way. So the old playbook, or this old equation of effort equals success, that's pre-AI. You have to rewire your brain to start understanding that it's now impact equals success. How can you have more impact in your output by layering your authentic intelligence, finding your zone of genius of like, what do I do uniquely? What is that perspective that I bring that's different than, everybody else? What's my secret sauce that I then take the output and make it my own? And now I can churn out a few more outputs than I used to be able to in just 12 hours,
Yes,
right?
yes.
And so that is what we really need to start thinking about. How do you humanize the output by bringing that contextual knowledge and understanding what your zone of genius is, and understand that you're no longer going to get rewarded for the grunt work. And think back to the times where we used to think, oh my gosh, I wish I could clone myself, or I wish that I could be in two places at once. The scary reality is now you
Yeah.
can clone yourself if you do it the right way.
Yeah.
And you're able to now free up the time to do the more strategic work, to do the more high value, just contextual knowledge type of work, where in the past you might have said, I did all of this research. I did all of this market data. I looked at, what are people wanting now? What are the trends? All of this stuff. I have it all together now. And now I have a couple of hours to make it my own. Now it's like, I pulled all of this data together in 30 minutes. Now I have hours to make it my own. And you can, and make a much better, more authentic output with it. And so
Yes,
that's the
yes.
difference of how do you humanize it in that way? How do you bring that zone of genius and that authenticity that only you bring to the output?
Yeah, I love that mindset shift, and I think that it's interesting that you say that, because you remember the trend that was recently coming out that was like, do hard stuff, and it's like, why? No, but then it's just like, no, live a soft life, have a soft morning, and but do hard stuff, and it's just like this juxtapose of like telling people to do one thing versus another, and then it's too much, right? And you are
Yes.
right. I mean, we have been conditioned to like be on this hamster wheel, and mind you, this is America, right? And yes, maybe
Yeah.
because America is advanced in so many cases, because we do burn the midnight oil, versus people in Europe that they're like, sorry, my email has found you, or I've taken 3 months off for the summer, right?
I'm on holiday. Yes.
Yeah, but I mean, there are still people that are doing very well in Europe, working, not working the crazy amount of hours that we are. So maybe there is something to be said here, and maybe just
Mm-hmm.
maybe the positivity of AI, coming into flux and really supporting us through our day to day chores. Of, you are right. We used to talk about wanting to clone ourselves, and now we have the ability to.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What skills become even more valuable in human skills? What human skills become even more valuable in an AI driven world, outside of like the strategy that you're talking about? And
Yeah. I think it is getting comfortable with change,
yeah,
right? Because the difference is that in the past it was like, okay, here's a scientific calculator, learn how to use it. Once you learned how to use every single button, or you knew what every single button was, it's like, okay, if I've mastered this scientific calculator. Or use Excel. Okay, I've learned how to do the VLOOKUPs. I've learned how to do all of these different things. You've mastered it. And it was a long time before there would be like any kind of major changes in it, where it's like, okay, with AI, it's different. You'll notice that every 6 to 8 weeks, there's like a new model, and it's doing something different, or it can do other things. And so now the only constant is going to be this idea of continuous learning at a faster clip that we ever have had before.
yeah,
And so this idea of I'm an expert in something is, you've got to be an expert in change. You're an expert in being kind of very, just elastic, in being able to like adopt and be able to continue to do work, in knowing that the way you did work 6 weeks ago may be very different than the way you do work today.
today.
And so that is probably going to be one of the biggest skills, is this idea of continuous learning and shifting, and knowing that your workflow may shift and you may have to update it, more often than we have been used to.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to go back a little bit, from lessons from building industry change. So I want to go to this returnship that you built, the program
Yes.
at Goldman Sachs. So this it became the gold standard globally. So I want to dive into a little bit. What did that experience teach you about leadership and innovation?
That experience taught me to really embrace this idea of being the pioneer, right? Nothing like that had ever existed. And, it's one of those things where it's just like, I had identified this pain problem. There was this pain, right? And it was individuals, mostly women, who, after 5 or 6 years in the workforce, extremely intelligent women graduating from, Ivy League institutions, working at some of the, blue chip organizations. But after 4 or 5 years, life happens. They have other responsibilities outside of the workplace that sometimes took precedent. And so they would take a voluntary break from their career to take care of these things. And in some cases, it might have been elder care. It might have been just, having children and being there. And these women were super intelligent, leaving, like executive roles in some cases, very seasoned employees. But back then, it was one of those things where if you had a gap on your resume, it was just like a career ending move, right? What have you been doing? You're outdated, all of this type of stuff. And so there was this idea that there was this hidden brain drain of like really intelligent people wanting to get back into the workplace, but hiring managers had this fear of like, this person has been out for 5 years or plus. And, if I bring them in, like you said, it's going to be really hard ramping them up or onboarding them and all this kind of stuff. So we decided to say like, hey, well, we do this with interns. We bring in brand new graduates who don't know anything. And over the course of a summer, 10 to 12 weeks, we kind of train them. And the ones that do the best, we extend them off full-time roles when they graduate to come work here.
Yeah, yeah.
Why couldn't we do the same thing with these seasoned employees where we give them much meatier projects, because they've already been trained for so many years, coming in. But why don't we tell managers, hey, we're going to remove the risk for you. You don't have to hire them full-time immediately. It's a little bit of a try before you buy thing. And they come on board. They do this work for you. Maybe there were some big projects on the back burner that you couldn't get to. Give this to these individuals. And after 12 weeks, there's an end date. If they didn't do a good job, you let them go. If they weren't a good fit for the team, you let them go. But if they were, you extend them a full-time offer and they just, they stay. And it was mitigating the risk, right? We found this pain point and there was definitely a need for this type of talent. But the risk was, oh, what if I hire this person and they really aren't ready to come back and it takes us a long time to, ramp them up. The irony is that at the end of the 12 weeks, probably more than 80% of the people, 85% of the people were getting full-time offers because they like hit the ground running and like proved that they added a lot of value. And so what I learned there is that you find a pain point, you build a bridge, and you remove the risk for people. And you end up coming with a really great outcome, but it never been done before. So just, it could have completely flopped and failed. It could have been like, oh, we were right. These people were, too far gone. They'd been gone for so many years.
Yes.
But instead, we proved them the other way. And so just really being able to kind of like be the pioneer and say, let's try this. If it fails, well, at least we tried it. We'll pivot and try something else. But it's really only if you kind of go out there and say, okay, blank canvas, let's see how this goes and let's pivot and make it work somehow.
Yeah, yeah. No, I appreciate that. Because I think it's knowledge that everyone can use, whether they're an enterprise or not, small business or not. I mean, that's fantastic that you were on that project and pioneering that forward, especially from a global standpoint.
Yeah, thank you.
How did you feel like the difference between the US and everywhere else in terms of how they approach it? Because it is a very different environment.
Yeah, it was very different. It was very interesting because we did roll this out globally and it started off kind of like as a footprint. And then, but ironically, one of the first kind of, when I was at Goldman, one of the first early adopters was the Asia, team, where there were definitely some more nuances where, especially when you think about gender nuances, and it was just, a much more kind of, they were a little bit more kind of like, oh, the women have a certain place.
Yes.
But what we found is that, they themselves it was affording women opportunities to come in and actually come in and do bigger and better roles in this kind of returnship piece, because it was like hey, let's go ahead and give them a shot. It's 10, 12 weeks. If they can prove themselves in 10 or 12 weeks, that would be great. And so that's where we saw really big, a really kind of great adoption where they were bringing in, I would say, non-traditional people into some of these returnship roles, that were helping people reinvent themselves. And that's where I think this idea of reinvention I've been doing all along, but realizing how important reinvention is now. Of, we were having people who may have been in the back office for many, many years, left and then wanted to come back and wanted to do a different role. And the returnship would afford them to prove themselves that they could have these transferable skills that would work in this other role
Yes.
and be able to come in. And so we even had front office people who were client facing who realized, I can't be client facing and on 24/7. I need a back office role, but I'm even better suited for the back office role because I know what happens after the sale. I know what needs to happen after the sale. And now I'm in the back office and I can make sure those things happen for the client facing person to help the client.
Yeah.
So it was really interesting to see all of that of
I love
pan out.
that. Yeah, it is very interesting. And, just as a marketer, understanding the different nuances of every market, and it's also understanding the nuances of every market, also from an internal standpoint and how companies operate and all that. And you having worked in enterprise and obviously maybe connecting with some other companies globally, it is a very different day to day aspect. So
Yes.
just switching gears and winding down the future of work. So fast forward 5 years from now, there is this
Mm-hmm.
call out of, everybody's got to make it before 2028 or 2030. It's the last run of the gold rush and so on. And it's like this fear mongering, that everybody has been feeling as it relates to AI. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to my role? I mean, am I going to have to become a plumber? Whatever.
Yeah.
What do you think work looks like in 5 years from now?
I mean, I think work is going to certainly be different, but I don't think that like jobs are going to get, and I keep harping on this, they're going to get redefined or reinvented. And it's basically the same person who has who built the skill set, who understands the sausage that goes into the sausage making, is the person who is probably best equipped to be the person orchestrating all the agents that are doing that work.
Yeah.
So it is that contextual knowledge and that nuanced knowledge. And so I say this only like, if we think about other industries where there was big industrial revolutions where like, okay, when they used to build buildings in the old time, it was just like all of this manual labor. And then all of a sudden they created, they found the crane or the excavator. Well, okay, they didn't need as many manual people shoveling with shovels or carrying these big boulders. Now they had the equipment to do it. But the new job was, who's the person who knows how to now drive or manipulate this crane or whatever. So it created a new job, but it couldn't just be anybody who, it was like, oh, this person really knows the intricacies of where the boulder needs to go or where they need to dig. And so it's the same kind of thing. The same thing happened when Excel was brought. They were like, oh my God, this is the end of the CPA. They're not going to need any more,
Yeah.
finance people. And the irony is there's more finance people now than there were before the, Excel came along.
Yeah.
And so I think it's the same thing. It's just that people have to evolve and understand how to use the tools. And it is going to open up a lot more jobs, but it's going to require us to use more of the,
Creative.
discernment, judgment, and the creative kind of decision making kind of parts of our brain that I don't think the AI is ever going to get there, especially when it comes to, the EQ, right? Like just the emotional intelligence of, there's no way an LLM's ever going to be able to be in a conversation like you or I and be watching for those social cues or those visual cues to say, ooh, I need to pivot because what I'm sharing with them is not resonating and all of that type of stuff, or the relationship management and all of those things. I mean, ironically, I think the more that the AI, is starting to be used, the more people are going to crave that human connection or the human piece of it.
Thank
And
you.
that's
Yeah.
where you have to go down.
Yeah. I really appreciate you saying all this because it is true, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we are looking at, yeah, I went to a panel and they were, these guys are deep in the AI model and the systems and, really working at a high level. And we have more coders today than we've ever had. for example.
Exactly.
So there is a lot of shift that's happening that's, optimizing and upscaling somebody's day-to-day job that they maybe necessarily wouldn't have thought to do. And right now, because the way AI is being fed is it's aggregating information from what currently exists. So the fact
Yes.
that you and I can come up with a new invention, a new something is not where AI is today. Now, problem solving, yes, but completely reinventing or recreating something from scratch, just even if we were to go back to the 1900s or even before then, just the build out of like the light bulb or something like that. AI is not going to be able to
Hmm.
do stuff like that. But the reason
Yeah.
why they can pass the medical exam is because the information's already there. Like if you give me a book that had all the answers, I'll be able to pass the medical exam. It would take me a
Exactly.
lot longer than AI, but still the information is right there.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Monica. This has been great, and really fulfilled with a lot of information here for us to take away with us. But before we let you go, we like to do something fun. So
Yeah.
whatever comes to mind, it's just three questions, one word, one myth, and one habit. Fire
Mhm.
away. So one word. What is one word that defines how you approach leadership in life?
One word, curiosity. Just be curious. Don't be afraid to, just try it out. Like, just be curious.
I love that. One myth. What's one myth about AI, leadership, or success that you wish people would stop believing outside of all of what we've been speaking about
Yeah.
today?
I think people need to stop believing that they have to be some sort of techie or software engineer to be able to use or understand AI. The new models, that the latest models that have come out, like don't require you to be that coder, even though some of the language or the terminology around it sounds foreign.
Yeah, no, I really like that, and really stay away from all the fear mongering because that's what's keeping you away from it. And we
Exactly.
need more people jumping onto it.
Yes.
What's one habit that's had the biggest impact on your success over the years?
The one habit that has had the biggest impact is always reminding myself that I do belong in the room.
I really truly appreciate that. That is so important because I think a lot of the times we let our own imposter syndrome, even when we've done a lot, get to us and think, oh, but there's somebody that's done XYZ. And I had a performance
Yes.
business coach, and he told me, Sasha, at the end of the day, they're just people.
Yes. Yes. And when you do get in those rooms, you realize that they are just people.
And there's a reason why you're in that room, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, guys, so whether you're excited about AI or still trying to figure out where it fits in your business, today's conversation is a reminder that technology works best when it helps people become more human, not less. Monica, thank you again for helping us uncomplicate this portion of it with AI, leadership, and the future of work all together. We really appreciate your time and effort, and we'll link all your information below so folks can get in contact with you. Thank you again.
Thank you.